All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we've got an update coming from Brian McIntyre about the Errol Spence Jr. Terence Crawford rematch, and a whole lot of people saying a whole lot of stuff that ain't true. As Brian McIntyre says or gives an update on the fight between the rematch between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back. Man, seesaw, back and forth. Is the Errol Spence Terence Crawford fight going to take place? What I've been saying for a while about what I thought was happening appears that it is true, and that is what is happening. And that the fight, despite what was said by Dan Rafael, or rather should I say, the interpretation that people made of what Dan Rafael of ESPN said meant, the interpretation of what the non-answer from Steven Espinoza, formerly of Showtime, meant. Despite all of that, we got an update from Brian Bomac McIntyre, who's a member of Terence Crawford's team, obviously. But before I get into that, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, man, hit that subscribe button. It ain't hurting you at all. And if you are a longtime subscriber and supporter like the great Barbara D and Aisha and Deborah Booker and Queen Vaughn and all the other ladies that come by the live stream and chop it up on the channel, salute to you ladies. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. But let's get into this, because Brian McIntyre says that Terence Crawford and Errol Spence are still negotiating for their rematch. Not that the fight is off. Now, shout out, I got to tell you who put me on to this, D-Town Boxing. Shout out to D-Town Boxing on D-Town Boxing's YouTube channel. Obviously, D-Town Boxing meaning Dallas. I do believe that's from Dallas. Big supporter of Errol Spence Jr. Let people know what Brian McIntyre had said. This was on a Fight Hype interview, but I did get the person that put me down on it first was D-Town Boxing. So make sure you guys go subscribe and support D-Town Boxing. That Brian McIntyre said, hey man, we're still in talks, trying to figure out what's going on. They're negotiating back and forth about what's going to happen in the rematch. Now, like I said, that is the most likely outcome of all of this, is that Terence Crawford is going to rematch Errol Spence. And the reason that I said that, and I believe that, is for two reasons. One, that is the biggest fight that Errol Spence Jr. Terence Crawford rather, knows he can get. Terence talks about wanting to fight Tim Tszyu. The fight with Tim Tszyu is not as big as the fight with Errol Spence, even the rematch. The fight with Jermell Charlo is not, even though Terence said he didn't want it, is not as big as the rematch for Errol Spence. Also, the fight with Canelo Alvarez is something that may be able to take place after he beats Terence, if he beats Errol Spence Jr. in a rematch, and Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez does whatever it is that Canelo Alvarez is doing, right? So also I thought that must be the reason why Terence Crawford is still holding on to 3 of the 4 championship belts, because one of the points of contention could very well be what weight the fight is going to be in. If Terence Crawford drops all of his belts at 147, it's going to be very hard for him to make the argument that the fight shouldn't take place at 154, right? And it is also, and so it is leverage for something that he's holding onto those belts for. Leverage most likely for the Errol Spence rematch. Now, one thing that was brought up, and again, shout out to D-Town Boxing, because I did want to talk about a few of his talking points that he made, was the idea that Terence Crawford, if he wanted to get out of the rematch clause, that he would have to pay a fee to Errol Spence Jr. to get out of it. Now, until I heard Bomac say, or them saying that Bomac said that they were still in negotiations and still trying to go back and forth about it, I was like, well, if the rematch clause expired, then, Terence Crawford can do whatever he wants to do. However, if he is in continuous negotiations for it, there could be a question as to whether or not he acquiesced to the date, to extending the deadline for that rematch clause. Now, I don't have his contract, but I do know that there's circumstances, like example, the fight between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, where Bob Arum had claimed that the fight had expired. And with the plain reading of the contract, that means that Tyson Fury could go off and do whatever Tyson wanted to do. It wound up not being the case, and the court or the mediator wound up enforcing the rematch clause. Now, notice that I said a mediator, then an arbitrator, right? So we don't know what the contract holds, there could be, and I'm sure there is, a contract resolution clause in that agreement that says you guys have to go to mediation or you got to go to arbitration if there is any type of issue between the two, and that is going to survive the expiration of the agreement, right? So, or at least that's what happened with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. So, in the end of the day, man, everything to me points to Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford rematching. It's the fight that Errol Spence Jr. wants. It's a fight that Terence Crawford will get paid the most money in. Also, Errol Spence Jr. letting people know about his injuries raised a question that, and not only letting people know about his injuries, but everything that people said about him going into that fight looking like something was wrong with him. Not me, other people. That's from my guy Sean, who... And a lot of people, just because I say what other people says doesn't mean that I said it. I'm just saying there's a lot of people out there that looked at Errol Spence Jr. in that fight and said that they didn't think something was wrong with him. Now that they have explanations for it or excuses for it, whichever way you want to phrase it, it just makes much more sense for Terence Crawford to go ahead and fight Errol Spence Jr., answer the questions about whether or not this man was injured or whether this man was not 100% there for that fight, and we can see the fight. There's no need to sit for Terence Crawford to sit around and wait for Canelo Alvarez to eventually tell him no to a fight. There's no need for Errol Spence Jr. to go fight. If Errol Spence Jr. is 100%, there's no need for him to go fight somebody else and take that much more wear and tear before he gets back in with Terence. Now, one of the things at D-Town, and again, I really like D-Town Boxing's video. Definitely, I think you guys should go check it out. He said there's a couple options. You could agree that you guys can both fight each other, somebody else, before you came back and they fought each other, or they could both let each other out of it. But at the end of the day, don't just take it with a grain of salt that fight between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford has been canceled. And because none of those options for Terence Crawford really looks real. And the fact that it is a big fight and Amazon Prime would put that on pay-per-view is probably the best route and the most realistic thing to happen. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.